Hi, Dr. Sasse here from the Continence Center at Sasse Surgical. I was recently asked a question I thought would be really helpful to address because it's probably been on the minds of other people who are considering their treatment options for bladder leakage or bladder incontinence or bowel incontinence or for overactive bladder. And the question was that if I did end up getting that bowel or bladder device, the neuromodulation device, would the hardware cause me some trouble or some side effects? Are there any sort of adverse things from having this gizmo implanted in the body? So let me try to address that, and at the very end I'm just going to leave you with a few thoughts that are sort of kernels of wisdom about this whole area, so hang in there with me for just a minute. So I guess the place to start is that sacral neuromodulation is really the only way that we know of to date that restores that connectivity of the nerve signaling and the intention down to the pelvic floor muscles and the sphincters of the bowel and bladders, and then their coordination, which is necessary in order to have proper control and proper emptying of the bowel and bladders. So we don't really have medications that do anything like that. In fact, the medications that are often prescribed actually have a bunch of adverse side effects that we talk about in other places. And we don't have something that can kind of restore that important connectivity that's lost without sacral neuromodulation. So in some sense, it's the only game in town for really solving the problem. However, it does involve implanting a little device that's going to give some stimulation, some gentle current down to the pelvic floor and to that neuromuscular interaction. A few things to keep in mind are that in the early days, the initial devices were fairly large. The largest generator piece was probably this big. We kind of joked in the old days that it was kind of like a hockey puck, or some people would say a dinner plate to be even more exaggerating. And so it was fairly large, and it was definitely palpable and kind of obvious to the person. It was back on their back pocket area, and of course you knew if you had that in. It's kind of similar to a lot of the larger neuromodulation devices that are still placed today for other purposes, such as pain management. But as time's gone by, the devices have gotten a lot smaller. And so today we're talking about something that's much smaller. Actually, in some of my other videos, I hold one up. I have them for you, but you can see that they're quite small. It's something you can hold in your hand just like this. And quite flat as well, so that the generator part of the device can be slipped under the skin and put under the subcutaneous fat. And even in a skinny person, the back pocket area always has a little bit of extra padding, and I don't think I've met anyone who said that they were even aware of it once it was in and a little time had gone by. So after a few weeks, the actual generator device, people have no awareness of that. And I'm sure there's exceptions to that, but that would be very unusual. And then the next thing is that if you kind of look at the diagrams online and kind of imagine how it goes, then the lead wire that goes under that subcutaneous tissue travels to the tailbone area and then goes through a natural canal called the foramen of the tailbone itself, so through the sacral foramen. And so there's plenty of room there for that lead to pass through, and then it just stays in the tissues. It has some little soft kind of tines, they're called, little prongs out to the side that keep it embedded in the tissue, and that's important because that way it will not move or migrate. And with these modern devices, I've never had any of them move or migrate. They really stay put in the tissues. So the next kind of question is, well, is there something about that part that might cause some side effect or hardware issue? And I would say that that could fall into a couple categories. So one is from the stimulation of the device itself. Is there kind of an electrical sort of component or stimulus where you might feel a shock or some sense of a weird pain? And mostly the answer to that is a hard no. We really don't see that. One of the reasons for that is that the improved devices over the years are using continuous current, which is at a very low amplitude. And so many people, it's working great and it's causing the sphincters to do their jobs and the pelvic floor muscles to do their jobs, but it is not causing even a sensation, so people don't even sense it. Some people will turn it up a little higher to the point where they do sense it, and we use the word kind of a light flutter to describe what the sensation is. And for them, they kind of like it there because they're sort of vaguely aware that it's working. It's not a necessity to have sensation, but for some people, that's kind of where they like it. But it's not the case that people generally feel any sort of shooting signals beyond that. And if they are, then there's probably something that's out of whack and is not quite right. So that would be something that we would want to investigate if somebody came and see me. And actually, I did have a case not too long ago where someone had a device that was placed elsewhere a long time ago, and it was giving some odd sensations off to the side, to the hip area, that was not normal. And what we found was that the device needed to be replaced. So that was a kind of a rare event that had been placed in an unusual location, and that it just wasn't quite doing what we wanted it to do, and it needed to be optimized. So we fixed that and got rid of that whole kind of nagging problem for the person. I think the last way in which somebody could have a sensation or something related to the hardware would also be rare, and that would just be, is there any awareness of the lead itself? And I would say generally the answer to that is no, but over many years I've had one and maybe two people who felt some awareness of where the lead was going and kind of turning and inserting into the tailbone area. And that is normally very easily remedied if that were going on, just by kind of making it a little deeper under the subcutaneous tissue. So the one of those that I recall from about 5 or 6 years ago, I learned to do a better job making sure that it was very deep within the deeper subcutaneous tissue, so there could not be any awareness or sensation if a person, had someone press right there on them. And since that time, I can't really, say that people have that problem. So anyway, theoretical with any kind of hardware in the body, plate screws, all the sort of stuff that we need sometimes to heal bones and joints, and hardware placed for all kinds of different reasons, pacemakers, etc. One can have some awareness from the generator itself. However, sacral neuromodulation, the generators have gotten so small and so flat that I don't think that's likely or generally possible. Second would be some electrical pulse or stimulation. That would be unusual, and that would usually because it's positioned in a place where it needs to be moved. That's not in the right place. And then lastly would be something related to the lead wire, perhaps where it bends or curves or something like that. And that is usually very easily fixable if it's a bother. And for most people it's just totally indiscernible, but a rare person might know something was just right there that could be buried deeper if it needed to be. So I think the most important things to realize, though, about this bowel and bladder incontinence problem overall is that it starts as kind of a minor problem, but it escalates quickly into something that's a real nuisance and begins to interfere with people's planning and their life and their sense of self, and waking them up at night and causing people to buy stuff and wear pads and alter their life too much. It's not something that you should have to put up with. Sacral neuromodulation is by far the best kept secret. Not very many people know how successful it is, that it offers proven 90+% effectiveness at resolving the problem. And what we might be thinking as kind of a sort of weird, kooky, procedure is actually a very minor procedure done with local anesthetic and a little bit of injection of local over the tailbone area. The device has gotten very small. The very low-level gentle current is not known to cause side effects or troubles. I think that most people find that they're very surprised at how effective and simple it is. So if this is a problem that you've been facing, I would sort of keep an open mind to the idea that what sounds kind of kooky and weird and invasive is actually likely to be very successful and not very invasive, and no, there's really not much to be worried about with respect to the hardware itself. The battery life has gotten incredibly long, so we're not having to go back and change batteries every few years. You should be able to keep this one 15 to 20 years. And most of the sort of things that cross our minds have been thought of and addressed by the manufacturers, who have figured out how to make them where you can get MRI scans and you can have something in that you don't even know is there working. Meanwhile, you're enjoying your life without bowel and bladder leakage. All right, I hope that's been helpful, kind of addressing the potential concerns with respect to the hardware. The 3 points I would just leave you with are: one, make sure you seek out a professional who is knowledgeable about all the treatments of bowel and bladder leakage, not just their one favorite thing, and they don't just prescribe one medication. Talk to them about sacral neuromodulation, talk to them about medications, talk to them about pelvic floor exercise therapies, and if it's bowel leakage, talk to them about Celesta or filler injection. Secondly, I would say don't let your doctor tell you it's normal at your age and you just have to put up with it. You know, unless they have stock and they're a major shareholder in the Depends Corporation, I would say they really just need to be told, hey, there's really great solutions for this problem, so don't feel like you have to put up with it. And thirdly, just recognize that there are excellent solutions. At least 9 times out of 10, if not more than that, we're able to largely solve, if not completely solve, the problem for the people that we see at the Continence Center and that you would likely see wherever you are around the country. So with that, I wish you the best of health at solving this problem. I hope this has been helpful.